How to Overcome Any Addiction, a psychological, philosophical, and neuroscience masterclass. You're not here because you're weak. You're not here because you lack discipline. You're not here because something is wrong with you. You're here because your brain learned something too well. And today I want to tell you something that might quietly change the way you see yourself forever. Addiction is not a failure of character. It's a predictable outcome of how the human brain works in the modern world. From the time we're young, we're given a simple story. Good people control themselves. Bad people don't. Disciplined people resist temptation. Weak people give in. But neuroscience tells a very different story. Your brain doesn't experience the world objectively. It experiences the world predictively. It is constantly asking one question: what keeps me safe, alive, and stable? Not happy, not fulfilled, not meaningful, but safe and predictable. And once something proves reliable at changing how you feel, even if it destroys your future, your brain marks it as important. That's how addiction begins. Not with pleasure, but with relief. Think back, not to when the addiction was at its worst, but to the beginning. The first time it worked, the first time the noise stopped, the first time the anxiety softened, the first time you felt normal, or powerful, or calm. That moment mattered, because in that moment, your nervous system learned, when I do this, I survive the moment. And the brain prioritizes survival over everything, over health, over relationships, over long-term goals, over your future self. Addiction isn't about wanting too much pleasure, it's about not wanting pain. Here's the part no one tells you. Your brain evolved for scarcity. For millions of years, dopamine was rare. Stimulation was limited. Reward required effort. Now, you carry super stimuli in your pocket. Infinite novelty, infinite validation, infinite escape. And your brain was never designed to say no forever. The shame loop. After the relief comes the crash, and after the crash comes the most addictive emotion of all: shame. Shame doesn't stop addiction. Shame fuels it, because shame hurts, and hurt demands relief. So the cycle continues. Urge, use, relief. Crash, shame, and urge for relief again. And that's how slowly, quietly, something worse happens. You stop believing change is possible. The part of you that craves is not your enemy. It's a survival system that learned the wrong lesson. And once you understand that, you stop fighting yourself. In the next section, I'm going to show you exactly how your brain gets hijacked, why motivation disappears, and why trying harder actually makes relapse more likely. Because once you see the machinery, you can dismantle it. The moment control disappears. At some point, everyone with an addiction experiences the same terrifying thought. Why did I do that again? You weren't confused before. You weren't debating. You weren't even enjoying it. It was automatic. That moment, the moment behavior happens without conscious choice, is where most people panic. They think, I've lost control. Something is wrong with me. I'm broken. But what actually happened is far more mechanical than personal. Your brain followed a pathway it had already carved. And the deeper the pathway, the less thought is required to travel it. Your brain is not you. Here's something you need to hear clearly. You are not your brain. Your brain is an organ. It has functions. It has priorities. And its number one priority is efficiency. The brain hates uncertainty. It hates wasted energy. It hates slow decision-making. So when it finds a behavior that reliably changes your internal state, it automates it. No permission required, no moral judgment involved, just wiring. This is why addiction feels stronger when you're tired, stressed, lonely, bored, or overwhelmed. Because under stress, the brain doesn't want to think. It wants to execute. Dopamine, the most misunderstood chemical. Most people think dopamine is pleasure. It's not. Dopamine is anticipation. It's the signal that says, this matters. Do it again. Dopamine spikes before the reward, not after. That's why the craving is often stronger than the experience itself. And every time you repeat the behavior, the brain learns faster. Cue prediction action outcome. Eventually, the brain stops waiting for the outcome. The cue alone becomes enough. A time of day, a feeling, a place, a thought. And suddenly the urge appears before you're aware of it. This is why addiction feels like it comes out of nowhere. It doesn't. It comes from memory. The prediction error trap. Here's where it gets darker. Dopamine spikes highest when rewards are unpredictable. Not guaranteed, not consistent, but random. This is why. Gambling is addictive. Social media is addictive. Porn escalation happens. Binge behavior spiral. Your brain keeps thinking, maybe this time will be different. And when reality fails to deliver, the brain doesn't quit. It doubles down. Because dopamine isn't saying, this feels good. It's saying, try again. Addiction is a system that never learns the lesson it promises to teach. Why willpower fails. Willpower is a prefrontal cortex function. That's the newest part of the brain, the slowest part, the most energy-hungry part. Addiction lives deeper. In the limbic system, this part is fast, emotional, and automatic. So every time you try to force your way out of addiction, you create a losing battle. A tired, rational system versus a fast, emotional survival system. That's why relapse often happens after progress, because effort creates fatigue, and fatigue hands control back to habit. The illusion of choice. Here's the uncomfortable truth. In the moment of craving, you are not choosing freely. You're choosing from a narrowed menu. Your brain has already filtered the options. That doesn't mean you're powerless, but it does mean freedom doesn't start inside the craving. It starts before it, in what you expose yourself to, in what you repeat, in what you allow your brain to rehearse. So if addiction isn't about pleasure, if it's not about weakness, if it's not even fully about choice, then what is it really? Addiction is a learning disorder, a brain that learned the wrong solution to emotional regulation. And the good news? Anything learned can be unlearned, but not through force, through redesign. In the next section, we're going deeper than behavior. We're going into identity, the invisible prison that keeps people stuck even after the urges fade. Because the hardest addiction to break is the story you tell yourself about who you are. The identity prison. Why you keep returning to what you swore you'd leave. There's a moment that confuses almost everyone trying to quit an addiction. It's not the early relapse, not the obvious one, not the I didn't even try relapse. It's the relapse after progress. Weeks clean, months discipline, life improving, and then, out of nowhere, you do the thing again. Not because the urge was unbearable, not because you forgot the pain, but because something inside you whispered, this doesn't feel like me. That whisper isn't a craving, it's an identity correction. Humans will abandon habits easily, but we will defend identity at all costs. If your self-concept says, I'm someone who struggles with this, I'm wired this way, this is just my weakness, then every moment of improvement creates internal tension. Growth begins to feel fake, stability feels unfamiliar, peace feels undeserved. So the brain does what it always does when something feels wrong. It restores the familiar, even if the familiar hurts. Every human lives inside a story about who they are, why they do, what kind of future they're allowed to have. And addiction isn't just a behavior inside that story, it becomes a central character. The struggle, the flaw, the battle. Remove the addiction without rewriting the story, and the mind panics, because now the story doesn't make sense anymore, and the brain hates meaningless narratives. True freedom begins when addiction becomes irrelevant to who you are, not resisted, not battled, but outgrown. Nietzsche had a phrase, become who you are. Not discover, not fix, become. Addiction survives when life feels smaller than the craving. It dies when life grows larger than the need, not through control, through expansion. So here is the shift that changes everything. You are not quitting something. You are becoming someone for whom that behavior no longer makes sense. And that transition isn't about force, it's about meaning. In the next section, we're stepping into philosophy, desire, suffering, freedom, and why chasing pleasure was never the real problem in the first place. Because once you understand desire, you stop being owned by it. Most people trying to overcome addiction believe they are in a war against urges, a war against temptation, a war against themselves. And wars create casualties, exhaustion, burnout, relapse. Because the moment you declare war on a part of yourself, you split in two. One side becomes the enemy, the other becomes the enforcer, and no one wins an internal civil war. Desire is not the problem. Desire is a signal, a message from the nervous system saying, something is missing, something needs attention, something hurts. Addiction begins when we treat desire like an order instead of information. You don't have to obey desire, but you do have to understand it. Buddhism teaches something radical. Craving is not painful because it wants something. Craving is painful because it insists, this must happen now. The suffering isn't the urge. The suffering is the resistance to the urge, or blind submission to it. But freedom exists in a third option, observation. An urge is not a command, it's a wave. It rises, it peaks, it falls, always. Neuroscience confirms this. Most urges last 10 to 20 minutes, if not reinforced. When you watch an urge without acting on it, something powerful happens. The brain updates its prediction. It learns. This feeling is survivable. This sensation passes. That learning is how freedom is built. The Stoics didn't believe in suppressing desire. They believed in clarifying control. You don't control thoughts appearing, urges arising, feelings surfacing. You control attention, response, and meaning. Once you stop trying to control the uncontrollable, energy returns. And with energy, choice reappears. Here's the paradox no one tells you. The more gently you hold yourself, the faster change happens. Harshness creates resistance. Patience creates learning. You don't quit addiction by hating it away. You outgrow it by no longer needing it. Real freedom isn't never having urges. Real freedom is not being owned by them. And once the war ends, you finally have the energy to build something better. In the next section, we move from understanding to execution. Not motivation, not discipline, but a neuroscience-backed system that rewires the brain at the level habits are actually formed. This is where change becomes inevitable. The Neuroscience Reset Protocol. How the brain actually rewires. Most recovery plans fail for one reason. They try to change behavior without changing the system that produces it. Your brain doesn't run on goals. It runs on patterns, and patterns don't respond to motivation. They respond to repetition, environment, and reward. So this isn't a checklist, it's a redesign. Step 1. Remove the cue, not the urge. Every addiction has cues: time, location, emotional state, device, routine. So reflect on what your addiction cues are and try to work on that. Step 2. Delay instead of deny. The brain panics when you say, never again, but it relaxes when you say, not right now. Delay turns a command into a conversation. Set a rule, I'll wait 20 minutes. During that time, move your body, change rooms, breathe slowly, drink water. When the urge passes, the brain learns a new truth. That learning is plasticity. Step 3. Dopamine rebalancing. Addiction floods the brain with dopamine spikes. Recovery is about restoring sensitivity. Try exercise, natural dopamine regulation. Cold exposure, dopamine without crash. Deep focus, slow dopamine. Boredom, yes, boredom is where the brain recalibrates. Without it, cravings stay loud. Step 4. Identity-based habit replacement. You don't remove habits, you replace them. But replacement must match the need, not the behavior. Ask, what does this addiction give me? Escape, calm, connection, intensity? Then build healthier systems that deliver the same outcome. Not perfectly, just consistently. Step 5. Meaning over pleasure. Dopamine alone cannot sustain recovery, meaning stabilizes it. People relapse when life feels empty without the addiction. So build, responsibility, progress, contribution, or creation. Meaning makes relapse unnecessary. One day you'll notice something subtle. The urge still appears, but it doesn't demand obedience. That's not willpower. That's rewiring. And now there's only one final step. Not quitting, not controlling, but becoming unaddictable. Becoming unaddictable. How to make change permanent. You've learned addiction is not weakness. Willpower is overrated. Urges are signals, not commands. Identity drives behavior, and that the brain is plastic. But knowledge alone is not enough. True change happens when the new identity overtakes the old one. You are no longer someone trying to quit. You are someone who doesn't need to. This is the difference between surviving and thriving. Here's the framework. Environment mastery. You control cues and you reduce triggers. The path of least resistance is the path to freedom. Identity alignment. Your self-concept matches your actions. You don't act as if. You act because you are. Meaning anchoring. Pleasure alone cannot sustain freedom. Purpose, growth, and connection replace it. Neuroplastic reinforcement. Repetition, deliberate practice, and delayed reward recalibrate your nervous system. Observation over obedience. You watch urges come and go. You don't obey them. You don't fight them. You outlast them. Freedom is not about eradicating desire. It's about not being owned by it. One day the urges will appear, and one day they won't matter. Not because you are stronger, not because you are luckier, not because you forced yourself to stop, but because you finally understood. You are not your cravings. You are not your habits. You are not the person who failed yesterday. You are the one building tomorrow, step by step, choice by choice, awareness by awareness. And from now on, you are unaddictable. If this video helped you, please don't forget to subscribe and help me keep creating life-changing content. I wish you the best. See you next time on My Way.